Welcome to Town Hall, folks. Anybody out there in the lobby? Come on in. We've already opened our meeting in the other room for the police promotions and the celebration of the Jack Lyman Award. It was very nice. And the folks and families are over in the lobby enjoying some refreshments. But we do have business to attend to. And is Brian Kenny back there somewhere? I don't see him.
Is he just coming up? He just came up the stairs.
There he is. We're going to start off tonight. Hey, Brian, come on in. With the town board asked for our assessor, Brian Kenny, who's going to step up to the podium right now, to report on an issue which he and the rest of us have been working on for probably over half a year, which has to do with equalization rates and the unfair burden imposed on Orangetown residents who live within the split school districts of Nanuet and Nyack. I see Bill Beckman is here too. Often works as a consultant to the town on matters of appraisal and equalization. And just for a little bit of context, the state runs numbers based on real estate value and sets equalization rates which affect the relative burden for homeowners and business owners. And this passed the estimates, which are still in draft form but will be set in stone at some point later this summer, I guess, appear to us to be unfair to a segment of the Orangetown population relative to Clarkstown specifically. And there's a variety of sort of advocacy efforts going on related to this, involving outreach directly to the Office of Real Property Services, using our state representatives, using our town lobbyists, using our informal professional networks to try to get the Office of Real Property Services to reconsider their numbers. And we invited Brian to lead us through in more detail than I can, certainly, some of the specifics of the equalization rate and the controversy that we're facing.
Well, everything you said is true, except for there's an added component this year, and that is the fact that the Pfizer property was split, and part of that is now in a pilot. And when the assessments were adjusted around for that, that affected equalization as well, because they used the numbers from the previous year. And so not only did the market increase in Orangetown versus the Clarkstown segment of our school districts, which is a problem in itself, we have this added problem with Pfizer and IRG. So it's sort of a double hit in the same year. And so what we're doing is we're trying to figure out if we can have part of that formula changed, or some of the numbers, I don't want to burden you, but I mean, it's a little technical on their part. But when we reduce the assessment, that directly affects their final calculation of the equalization rate. So we're trying to get that mitigated somewhat. Also, Bill did a lot of work on presenting information to the state, which we do every year anyway. And we go up there and we give them information usually in the late winter or late fall. And then we have set up meetings, which they invite every town to come up and discuss their initial numbers. And we do that too, and we present more information. And unfortunately, what's happening up there in that office around the state too is they seem to be doing away with people. They've now become part of the Department of Taxation and Finance. The offices are losing people, losing competency, and they're not always taking a really good look, we feel, at the information we're providing them. There is an avenue for that, and once the tentative ratios are set, which is coming soon, there is an appeal process. Now, I've been on the phone this week a few times with ORPS. They, at this point, understand our problem. They want to help us as best they can. They're supposed to be on our side, and they said that. And as hopefully everybody read the memos I gave you and the letters you've seen. So we've done a lot of work, meeting with people, going to Albany, explaining the problem. But, we're sort of stymied by the real property tax law for split school districts, which has inbred formulas to apportion school taxes. My argument with them the last couple of weeks has been, listen, you've got a large property in Orangetown that is essentially subsidizing Nanuet schools. And most of that is now in a pilot that you're getting that has nothing to do with collecting taxes in the normal way. This is a pilot in Orangetown. And yet we're being, it's coming from here, but we're subsidizing you, the rest of Clarkstown, with that money. And some of that compensation should be reversed and given back to some of the taxpayers, or relieved of this so-called increase that we might see. In fact, there's going to be an increase, just a question of how much. So we're trying to mitigate that as well, have them rerun some of their formulas for apportionment, along with other things that, we're looking at long-term too, trying to get the law changed so there is really no shifting that can take place in any given year this large. We went from 50% equalization for 2016 to 44. It's not final yet, but that's where we're at now. Now that's a tremendous increase or decrease for 1 year. So we don't feel that that's proper either. That would have to be an amendment to the law, but we've brought that to their attention. We've had the real property, chairman of the Real Property Committee, the legislature was there at our meetings and our conference calls. And, they understand, but they're very reluctant to do something like that. But, my point with them at the time was, listen, and Clarkstown is involved too, and their representatives. Yes, you want to protect your own taxpayers, and we don't want to shift taxes to Clarkstown, but they have to understand the problem. And a problem we're having this year could be your problem next year. And the whole idea of taxation and assessment is supposed to, be equal, it's supposed to be equity, and this is one of those cases where it's really not. So we're doing our best. In fact, one of the legislators in our first meeting up there said, what are you doing here? Why is the town involved? This is a school tax issue. And I said, because of the equity issue, because we're going to hear about it. And not only that, you're going to hear about it at the school, and the legislators are going to hear about it. So we're all in this together. So we have been diligently working, trying to figure a solution to this thing, and we're doing it on a number of fronts. And I don't know, Bill, you want to add anything to this?
Just very quickly, I know everybody on the boards are familiar with what the equalization rate is. The equalization rate is basically a weighted average. It's required by the state constitution, and it examines the assessment roll on an annual basis to come up with what the ratio is of assessed value to full value. And that prorates out all kinds of taxes besides school taxes, county taxes, mortgage taxes, and a whole host of things, including debt limits, et cetera. So it's a very, very important number. There's two major issues that Brian touched on. First one is the residential value, which is the major component of any equalization rate in Rockland County. And by the way, we're preparing, and this all could go to litigation later on too, that everybody should be familiar with. But what happened this year is the state came out after we supplied all the data back before January, because we're there all the time. They said that the properties in Orangetown went up 5% in value, while the properties in Clarkstown stayed at 0%. So that was the fundamental issue on the residential area. We supplied them with data showing that Orangetown did not go up 5% and went up a number less than 5%. So that's one of the issues that we're working with. We supplied them tons of data. They have their data, we have our data, so that's one issue. And then how Pfizer's being handled is the second issue. So besides meeting in Albany, meeting with all the school districts, et cetera, we're preparing to do what they call an equalization rate complaint. Okay, as of today, we were told that they're holding off sending us the tentative equalization rate because they're going to take a harder look at the data that we've given them and some of the stuff that Brian's been working with them on, so hopefully we can resolve the issue before we go to a complaint and possibly before we go to litigate with them. So that's basically what the situation is. There's two issues, but the equalization rate's a weighted average. And by the way, it's not necessarily a bad thing, the equalization rate coming down. We're going back to 2009 levels. I mean, it has its implications as far as taxes go, but showing that property values are going up, which is true. In Orangetown, property values are going up, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's the ratio. Okay? Are we going up evenly, faster, slower than everybody else that prorates the taxes out? So the equalization rate going down is not necessarily a problem. It's how it's in conjunction with everybody else. It's good the property values are going up. It's good for the homeowners. It's good for everybody that the property value is going up. It's just that relationship that we're involved with that does all the other prorations. So I don't know if there's any questions.
Just to summarize, the first step is to basically get them to correct their math based on the improbability that Clarkstown will be at 0 and Orangetown will be at 5, you know, in related matters. And the second, maybe longer range, is these policy issues related to maybe doing it a different way. But I'm not sure, like, those aren't going to be resolved in this round.
No.
And I thought your letter that you put together targeting Mr. Wolam from the Office of Real Property Tax Services, basically saying, please run these data again. Please run scenarios so we can better understand how these choices you're making in running the data are affecting our equalization rate. You know, he really needs to respond to those very specific requests.
Well, you know,
Has he gotten back to you about that?
Yeah, to his credit, he has, I have talked to him twice this week.
Okay, good.
And of course, he has to run things by his bosses up in Albany, and they are going to run some numbers. They are going to take a look at it. There's some technical issues with how the reduction, when it did take place for Pfizer and IRG, where those numbers were in the formulas. They can switch from one box to another. You know, it can certainly help. They're going to do that too. They understand that. Everybody knows that, he said, and they know it's a problem. They're supposedly on our side. You know, they're not adamant about saying, no, that can't change and this kind of a thing.
Another question for you. On this question of lodging the complaint, do you think that the school district boards will support that complaint, given that a portion of their taxpayers are being treated unfairly?
No, because, you know what, that sounds like the legislator from Clarkstown was saying that, you know, we have to protect my tax. Well, first of all, nothing's been set yet. The only thing that's been set, and that's not even set, is the school budget.
The levy's
How
the
it's
only thing
apportioned
that's
out
been
is
set.
it's not finalized yet. Nobody even knows this. In fact, nobody knows what the answer is going to be until they do it. And you can't do it until we have a final equalization rate, and we don't have one yet. Whatever it is it's going to be, that affects their formulas. So they're a little premature by saying, we have to protect ourselves, we don't have anything to change. Nothing happened yet. It's all hearsay, and it's estimated right now. So we want to jump on this before anything is finalized, and then it has to be amended afterward. Then you can make that argument. But really, right now, it's premature for that. You know.
It just seems like, you know, you're being very proactive in trying to address this.
Yeah.
And the school districts themselves really
The
ought to
school
be
is
cooperating and
well,
supporting.
So
School was
school
the first-
districts, the school districts are split between two towns.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So they
So
really
you
should
have
interest
people
in resolving
from Orangetown on one side, people from Clarkstown on another side.
it. Right.
And they're ministerial. They just have to take the numbers and do it. I
Well,
mean,
the school, to their credit, you know, blew the whistle on this when they did their projections and said, this is a problem. You know, Nanuet and Orangetown's going to go up a lot, and actually Nanuet and Clarkstown, and that is going to go down. Now, how could that be? You know, that's crazy. The school, they're going to stay within a 2% cap, yet right now, the way it looks to them, the tax rate in the Nanuet segment in Clarkstown will actually go down. While the budget actually goes up 2%, they may go down 2%. While the burden is on the Orangetown taxpayers. That doesn't make sense. That's not
No, it
right.
doesn't.
It's not logical, and it's not normal. So that's the kind of thing that there are different ways to mitigate that. Schools are reluctant to change their policies. And I said, in fact, I was on the phone with him today about the pilot. I said, listen, the pilot is above and beyond tax revenues you're getting in the normal way. Right? This is something that's, negotiated, given to you. I said, when we get a pilot payment, Jeff can put part of that payment into the sewer plant. He can put it into townwide, the Nyack Police, whatever he wants to put in it. There's no formula that says you must reduce your, budget across the board that I know of. And I said that to the school, and they said, well, gee, I don't know if that's legal. We're going to have to look into that. They could take part of that money that's coming from Orangetown to relieve the Orangetown taxpayers if they wanted to. And that's another thing, we're going to write another letter about that.
That's what I'm saying. So we need to have a
So-
decision maker within the school districts targeted with a specific action.
Well, that's an option that they can do if they want to do it.
Right.
I think they can do that.
Right.
You don't want to ask anybody, you ask your own attorneys, can you do that? My opinion has always been, if it doesn't say you can't do something, you just do it. If somebody doesn't like it, then you can come back and they can tell you next year. But I mean, this is just not the way things are supposed to be. It's it's just an unusually bad year, when all these things seem to take place at the same time. And unfortunately, as Bill pointed out, we have no standing to say to New York State, okay, you're saying we went up 5%, or you're trending us up 5% for residential properties. Clarkstown is 0%. We'd love to be able to go to New York State and say, here's the data on Clarkstown, that's not 0%. That's wrong, right? Now, the other part of this, I said to them also in the long term, Rockland is the smallest county in the state. Why you're losing people in your office, more work for less people. Why don't you just do these trends for the county at the same time? So this kind of a thing doesn't happen in a small county like this. If there's one trend for everybody, there wouldn't be these shifts town to town from year to year. So that's another thing. But, telling them that, they nod their head and they're like, but that's not how we do it. You know what I mean? But that's really what they should be doing. They should be thinking long term. And I think I mentioned that to Matt Rand the other day. And that would be something we would put in our appeal too. This is a long-term solution to these kinds of problems. But, dealing with the state is difficult. Changing the very fundamental rules that they go by for, the last 100 years is going to be difficult. But taxes are getting too high for this shenanigans. Really, they've got to start cleaning their act. And we can't have something like this every year. I mean, this could happen to them next year, But anyway, so we looking at this from about 16 different angles, so we'll see what we can do, and I'll keep you informed. And, if we have to come back, we'll talk about it again if you want, but I'll let you know,
All right.
okay?
Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you very much. Thank
Do
you.
you want to say anything about the pilot, or, by the way?
The JP Morgan pilot?
Yeah.
I mean,
Can we
Does
ask
town
a
board-
question on that, on their statements?
No, this is a workshop.
Michael, we're not gonna have a discussion right now on this. And we're having a good presentation on it, and we can certainly follow up. We'll have public comment in a minute, right? On the JP Morgan pilot, that's been negotiated with the school district. The school district hasn't voted on it yet. Town board action would follow them in
Right.
the usual course of events.
I think what the school is going to do, according to Quentin, they may take this draft and agree to it, resolve it, subject to the property being sold and actually going into it.
Right.
Now, you can do that if you want, or you can wait till, the property transfers and then do it. But my point, I think, would be the faster things get done, the better, because we want this program to start, if possible, by the September school tax time, so we can get this thing going this first 2 years. And from what I understand, they would like that too. But
Okay.
so whatever the board can do to speed this along. Yeah,
All right.
so that's it. As far as the tax schedule goes, that assessment schedule was negotiated. We presented the initial schedule. They came back with a low ball. They came back with what they wanted. Then of course, we kept the school in the loop, and Quentin was very good, and he came back with, some other numbers. We massaged the numbers, gave it back to JP Morgan, and basically said, listen, we're not gonna do this forever, 'cause we'd like to finalize this right now. And they agreed. They
Okay.
took that, so,
All right, so we'll have that up for approval at a meeting soon.
okay, very good. Okay. You're welcome.
With that, I'd like to have a motion to open our public comment. From Troy, second from Divany. All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Do we have a sign-in sheet? Oh, boy. Thank you, Eric, for that.
What did we knock over?
No, it's the recorder.
Tape recorder fell down. Tom, you want a cup of water?
Thank you.
Can I have the sign-in sheet, please? So, once again, we're opening our public comment period. I have about 8 people signed in. Folks who haven't been here before, there's a clock on the wall. We appreciate your comments. We're here to listen. Unfortunately, in a public forum like this, it's not a forum for debate. The town board members will listen. They'll respond as they see fit once everybody's had a chance to say their piece. And we look forward to the insights and comments that our town residents bring. First up would be Kathleen Kelly. Kathleen?
She's not here. I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you
all the
very
time.
much.
Okay.
You're not being sworn in, though.
Well, you know. So I'm here to discuss my displeasure with the ruling today regarding Aloof Plastics. It was my understanding, reading the information that was given to us today, that they entered into a civil compromise by Deputy Town Attorney Dennis Michaels, who appeared to act unilaterally in this decision. It was our understanding from coming here week after week, writing our complaints day after day, week after week, month after month, for years on end, with the emissions and odorous output of this company. In this civil compromise, Dennis Michaels, again appearing to act unilaterally, spoke on the behalf of the people. He certainly did not speak for me, that he agreed to withdraw and dismiss all alleged violations of Orangetown zoning code. He also agreed to settle the liabilities and violations and fines for only $12,500 to this company. I think that's appalling, and I think you as our elected representative should also be as appalled, because we all sat here during the meeting when it looked like you were in agreement that this company had to have some changes made. Now, you know, so my question is, was Mr. Michaels advised to go to trial by his supervisor? He is the deputy town attorney. He is not our town attorney. Why didn't he do that? To whom does he answer? And what will be the repercussions for this egregious act that occurred today? I pulled the civil penalty policy for the DEC that happens to companies that actually have these kind of violations again and again and again. And it appears that there should be a gravity component to fines alleviated towards these companies. And they have many factors: potential harm and actual damage to life, human, animal, otherwise, the environment, the water. By their own admission, on May 25th, 2016, their representative said, "We are trying our best and we will try to improve our situation shortly." They've been written up by the DEC more than 3 times in 2016. Lastly, the longer the violation continues, uncorrected or unremediated, the greater the risk of harm is and the greater the fine should be. They also talk about culpability of the company. How much control did they have over the events? They admitted to duct taping some of their events together. They also said that they can't be sure that employees will keep the doors closed to keep all of the odors and emissions in. To me, that shows they have a lot of culpability from now and in the future. And the foreseeable of the events constituting the violation continuing, I do see them continuing. I don't think they've done anything to make this any better. And as our elected officials, I'd really like to hear your comments on this. Thank you, gentlemen, and Ms. Madigan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. We will definitely respond. Eileen Larkin, please.
I had hoped to be, I hope to have these questions answered about the equalization rate. Number one, you have to be Einstein, and even he gets confused about how to understand the equalization rate. Pilot programs I've never been in favor of. I feel they affect the residential properties as opposed to the one particular site that's benefiting from pilot programs. One of the questions I wanted to know was, is the commercial base affected by the issue that's going on right now about the equalization rate affecting the residential properties? All I hear about is the residential property. I should like to know if the commercial base is affected either in a plus or a minus way. How did the state determine that the properties in Orangetown, the residential properties in Orangetown, value went up by 5%, where in Clarkstown, the value of the property was a minus? I think we all are concerned about our taxes going up. Why do they go up? I've been asked that by people who live in Sneedon's Landing. They pay $30,000, $50,000 a year in property taxes. They don't have sewers. They wonder why the school taxes go up when the enrollment is going down. I don't have an answer. So come to the town board meetings or ask. I feel unfortunate and sad that we weren't able to ask Mr. Kenny to answer a few questions. I think that was the purpose of his coming here tonight, and I think he should be asked to come back again to answer those questions. The other thing I'd like to put a plug in for is Palisades Community Center's week-long tag sale is going on this week, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we have wonderful, wonderful things there to buy. And we also have a high tour animal shelter is bringing animals down that can be adopted. That's on Saturday. And High Tour reminds me that whatever is happening with High Tour property, High Tour coming into Orangetown, I understand there was 1 acre of land that was supposedly set aside for them is now longer down from 3 to 2. First is the state, then is the county. We want to know, will High Tour come to Orangetown? The state of New York, the county of Rockland needs a shelter. If we don't have one, Orangetown will have to build its own. Clarkstown will have to build its own. So what is the story for the poor animals that need a place to live temporarily and be adopted? And I should like an answer to my questions about the properties in Orangetown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Larkin. Great questions, great comments. Our next is Michael Mandel, also a member of our planning board.
Good evening, Supervisor Stewart, members of the town board. For the record, my name is Michael Mandel, resident of Pearl River. If you take a look at understanding the equalization rate prepared by the Department of Taxation and Finance of the state of New York, it states the equalization rate is the total assessed value of municipality divided by the total market value of municipality. That's how you derive the equalization rate. I took a look at our tax assessors' records for 16 and 17. I checked houses in Pearl River, Piermont, Grandview, Palisades, Orangeburg, and Nyack. What did I find? Increase in market value of anywhere from $46,000 to $84,000. It comes out to exactly, for each and every house, a 13.75% increase in the full market value. How can they stand here and say 5% increase by the state? They supply the state with the numbers. His records show, and that's why he should have stayed here to answer our questions as to this conflict between what he states and what his records show. They're two totally different things. And why does every other department head stay here and come to these meetings when he doesn't stay here or come to these meetings? Why should there be an exception to the rule? That should not happen. and that should be demanded that he does come. Now, how is this going to affect our town taxes, our county taxes, our state taxes? You know, and how do you determine? How did he determine the full market value? Did he throw a coin up in the air and it came down on the pile that says 13.75%? Go take a look at your taxes. Go look at their records. They're online for the last 5 years. And before that, the valuations may be changed over 5 years, $20-something thousand maximum for a house. In my case, my house. Most of them stay pretty much the same. So we have totally different needs. And what about the other towns in Rockland? Do their values go up or down? And why does he reassess our homes every year? Take a look. The total assessed value stays the same, but the taxes, the full market value changes every year. Based upon what? That's what I'd like to know. I think all the other taxpayers would like to know. So if you go to back last year, you'll find if you divide, like the equation I gave you, it comes to 50.05. If you divide this year, it's 44. And Mr. Supervisor, you should have had him stay here, or you should have had him answer our questions right then and now. And the second thing I just wanted to say about the workshop, you approved the hiring of Keenan Bean to represent the town in Chief Nolte in the case of Brook versus the County of Rockland et al. First, you did not discuss the item, which is public information. Second, you did not set an attorney amount on the attorney's fees, and you voted on it at the workshop. Now, this case involves a claim of retaliatory action against the whistleblower, Brook, for speaking up regarding issues at the Rockland County Police Academy before the federal court in the Southern District. The issue centered specifically on, if you let me admit it, Police Academy submitted false curriculum to the state of New York. Now, how much is it going to cost the town for the attorney fees? And why didn't we combine with some of the other people in this case? Rockland County, the Sheriff's Department, there's 3 under-sheriffs, the police chiefs of Orangetown, Spring Valley, Piermont, in their capacity as members of the Rockland County Police Chiefs Association, and the director of the Police Academy. We're spending money for attorneys. Why didn't we work with other attorneys on this case? And the case should have been discussed. It is public information. You can go on to the Southern District and find it all for a couple of dollars. But I would like, and I still say again, Mr. Kenny should have been staying here to answer the questions of the public, and I think the board should demand it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel. Allison Sullivan?
Hello. I'm reading this for Tanya Witek, but I completely agree with it. It might go over 3 minutes. Please let me finish, if you would. All right. Dear Orangetown officials, as a co-founder of the grassroots group Clean Air for Orangetown, I'm deeply disappointed with the legal outcome of the town of Orangetown's case against Aloof Plastics today. There have been hundreds of complaints against Aloof from many community members over the past year, but complaints about the factory date back to the early 1990s. Hundreds of odor complaints by many residents have been officially submitted during the past year, but only a handful of affidavits, about 13 from 2 residents, were used as part of this case against Aloof. The community deserves an explanation as to why more affidavits from more residents were not included as part of the case. When I first became involved, a friend who lives near Aloof contacted me and recommended that I think twice about becoming involved. They had complained about Aloof back in the 1990s, but finally felt as though they hit a wall, and so they gave up. Aloof would get a small slap on the wrist and then continue business as usual. Observing the legal process play out in the town court has been eye-opening. The defendants I've seen represented a wide cross-section of our population: teenagers, small business owners, homeowners, even a resident suffering from dementia represented by an overwhelmed caregiver. To see the various residents receive consequences for their violations has served as a personal reminder to keep our garbage bins in order and to apply for the correct building permits for any work on our home. It has inspired me to speak to my children about making sure they are never tangled up in the wrong crowd, because there are legal ramifications for trespassing or having an open container. It is good to know that our town is enforcing the town code in certain matters. The majority of the defendants appeared to take responsibility for their actions and faced the legal consequences. However, in the case of Aloof, not only is the $12,500 fine the equivalent of pennies for this huge company with annual sales exceeding $100 million, the resolution states that they take absolutely no responsibility for their actions. As recently as Memorial Day, residents complained to officials that their outdoor plants were ruined by the odor of burning plastic. Although there is mitigation plan pending with the DEC, the odor problems are far from being resolved. For the case to be resolved on the town level before this issue has been stabilized is not only an insult to the community, but it serves as a clear invitation to other businesses to come and pollute freely in Orangetown. What happens if the DEC plans do not solve the odor problems at this decrepit facility, which is never meant to house a plastic factory in the first place? Is another year-long process initiated by the DEC? Do we know what the health implications are from long-term exposure to the plastic fumes as they try to remedy the situation? Perhaps the biggest victory for clean air for Orangetown was the establishment of the public health engineer position. I was present when Heather Hurley suggested this position to Andy Stewart on the steps of the town hall after one of Aloof's disappointing court appearances. It seemed like a brilliant idea and only our chance to help hold local companies accountable. However, if there are next to no legal consequences for companies which violate our town code, it makes me question whether that position will have any impact. Like the members of our grassroots group, you have all invested a lot of time into this issue as board members, and you all live in Orangetown as well. Over a year ago, the town board urged residents to be patient and to let the process play out. We have not yet seen the results of the final DEC resolution. Given the uncertainty which lies ahead, I wonder how each of you feels about the legal resolution on the town level. Best wishes, Tanya Wetek. Thank you.
Thank you, and I know that's available online if anybody wants to have a copy of it. Let's see. Amy Pritchett.
Good evening, Town Board. I want to echo what everyone else has said about Aloof, and I would just really like to know from each one of you how you feel about what happened today, and what does $12,500 represent to the people who have to continue to smell these odors day in and day out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chris Day.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Chris Day, resident of Orangeburg. I just want to speak briefly on the Aloof issue. I was shocked to see this settlement. It's probably the worst possible outcome you could expect, not just because the sum of money is so small and the company is so big, but also because right when Aloof has agreed to make improvements that were approved by the ZBA, we lose all leverage on them with the potential fines that were outstanding against them by waiving the responsibility and giving them a tiny little fine. The town totally has lost the ability to pursue this company for things that they actually did, and also agreed with them that they don't have to take responsibility for it. It's not how it should have been done. I don't know where the authority was given to this deputy town attorney to sign this agreement. If it was done on his own, I think there should be personnel action against him. If it was done through direction of his supervisors, there needs to be discussions amongst you guys how that could possibly have occurred. It also speaks to the need to have a re-examination of our LLC and our fines for larger companies in this town. Fines should not be based solely on a raw dollar amount. They should be based partially, not just on severity of the crime, but on the ability of large entities to pay. When a company is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, they don't mind paying fines this small because they're just the cost of doing business. It costs less money to pay $12,500 than it does to shut down that production line for 6 hours. So of course they're not going to shut it down and fix it. They're going to just pay the fines and move on. I also wanted to touch briefly on the recent proposed LLC identification law. I think that goes hand in hand with that sort of initiative, and I think it's a great idea on the part of the town board and on the supervisor's part. We need to make sure we know who's behind these sort of companies in town, whether they're in manufacturing or they're in residential developments, and be able to identify an individual who can be held personally responsible. So I applaud that action. I hope it continues and is eventually passed. But I do really think that we need to relook at how we're making sure that our neighbors are all good neighbors in this town, whether they're offering emissions out into the town or they're holding properties within it. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Manna Joe, are you still here? Oh, great.
Good evening.
Welcome.
I'm Manna Jo Green. I am the Environmental Director for Hudson River Sloop Clearwater. And by way of full disclosure, I serve on the Ulster County Legislature. But I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Clearwater and on behalf of a memorializing resolution that we're seeking in support of a sale that Clearwater is doing. We're leaving from the Revival, our great Clearwater Festival, on June 18th, and we're sailing down to Washington, D.C. to reenact a sail that Pete Seeger and the crew did in 1970, calling for the passage of the Clean Water Act, which was passed in 1972. They got down to D.C., they held an educational forum for Congress, and we're doing the same thing this year. And we're bringing a message of concern. We're asking for strong environmental protection and with a focus on clean water. And in addition to that cargo of concern, we're bringing Hudson Valley produce and the positive things that have resulted from the passage of the Clean Water Act and the environmental protections. We can't have a healthy economy without a healthy environment. And so that is my purpose tonight. I want to also mention that we've made a lot of progress in the last 45 years since the passage of the Clean Water Act, but the job is not done. We all know the tragic situation that occurred in Flint, Michigan, but we also have the city of Newburgh with a poisoned water supply, and Hoosick Falls, and many other examples. The Hudson River itself and all the tributaries and the entire watershed still face many challenges, and that is the purpose. Clean water is not a partisan issue. It affects all of us. It's central to our health and well-being, and so we are asking for support. I will also stay if anyone has any questions during the discussion of that resolution, and if need be, it can be modified to express the will of this town board. We have somewhere between 25 and 50 positive responses, so you're not the only town or village or county that is considering this resolution, but it would be part of the message we want to bring to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Last sign-in is Michael Seltzer, or Seliger.
Good evening. I'm here indeed to speak in support of the municipal resolution. My name is Mike Seliger. I've lived at 49 Edgewood Drive in Orangeburg, just a short walk from Town Hall, for the past 27 years. For much of my professional life, I was Dean for Planning at Bronx Community College, where I was responsible for the development and direction of our Center for Sustainable Energy. I grew up in this part of Rockland County, mostly in Hickory Hill and Tappan, but even before that, I lived in Shanks Village for 4 years. And while living there, I still recall being able to be taken to the Upper Nyack Beach, where I waded and swam in the Hudson. Clearwater's work and the legislation that emerged as the importance of clean water and healthy rivers was recognized, and they've led us to a time when the Hudson is again a vital asset of our communities and for our communities. It is important that we support continued efforts to sustain this life-giving resource and not allow it to be neglected in the future. Accordingly, I am proud to be a voice in support of the town's resolution in support of Clearwater's mission, delivering the message of the importance of clean water as a life-giving force. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That completes our sign-ins. By raise of hands, is anybody else here to speak tonight? See a hand going up. Heather Hurley.
Hi, good evening. Heather Hurley, Pearl River. I too just wanted to say how disheartened I was by today's aloof court decision. First, I wanted to just thank Christoph Wittek from the Clean Air for Orangetown Grassroots Group for researching the company TRC months ago and presenting their proposal for air monitoring to the town board, and to also thank him for researching equipment such as the nasal gun and giving all of that information to this town board to consider buying for the town, but unfortunately has since gone nowhere, just as the town's filing injunctive relief in Rockland County Supreme Court also went nowhere, unfortunately. In an email dated June 5th, Mr. Michaels was directed to go to trial at today's appearance, but yet he withdrew and dismissed alleged violations. In an email from today from Mr. Divney stated it was his opinion that Mr. Michaels should be fired for not complying with a directive from an elected official. So tonight I was wondering if each and every board member could please state their opinion on the matter as to whether or not they also agree with that sentiment that Mr. Michaels should be fired or face disciplinary action. This is truly an injustice and an insult to the people of Orangetown, and especially those people that live in that direct area that go through this almost on a daily basis. Mr. Michaels was present at the most recent ZBA meeting where Aloof admitted on the record that there was an odor problem. Mr. Michaels and Mr. Giardello were in possession of hundreds of email complaints from the past year and since July when they were first cited by the town. So why were only 15 affidavits from only 2 individuals submitted when there were numerous other residents who complained and who were willing to sign an affidavit? I've asked this before but have never received an answer. And lastly, why wasn't any town board member present in court this morning to ensure that Dennis Michaels followed through with what he was told to do? Thank you. That's all I can say. It's very, very disappointing, and I feel that the residents are losing confidence in this whole process, and it's a shame. It really is.
By raise of hands, anybody else here to speak tonight? Mr. Riff, our deputy supervisor.
I want to begin by saying that I concur with the previous speakers on the matter of Aloof, and I'm also confident that the town board will get to the bottom of it and do what's correct. But tonight I'm here to speak in support of Clearwater resolution opposing the gutting of the EPA budget and funding for climate science and clean water. Federal funds help build the Orangetown WWTP, also known as the sewer plant, which is our town's biggest investment in clean water and the Hudson River. Without this investment in clean water by federal, state, and local government, the Hudson River, instead of being the beautiful swimmable river and estuary it is today, would still be a repulsive industrial sewer. We need more federal funding for clean water, not less. Sustainability is so important. Years ago, and I'm kind of addressing comments that were made about me 3 weeks ago, we had a big fight in Orangetown on whether to shut down the town's sludge incinerator at our WWTP. Kind of like the fights we have had over Nelitech and Aloof. More recently, Orangetown had the only incinerator in Rockland County and had a profitable arrangement with the county to burn its sludge and industrial waste. Our town board was divided on closing the incinerator, and I'm proud to say that despite immense political pressure, I cast the tie-breaking vote to close the incinerator, to the dismay of my, at that time, Republican colleagues. In my mind's eye, public health took preference over short-term profit. Now all sludge is composted by the county and sold as clean soil to landscapers. What an improvement. That's sustainability. As proud as I am to have personally helped to end incineration in Orangetown and Rockland County, I'm so impressed with Clearwater's long fight to clean up the Hudson, including GE's huge cleanup of toxic PCBs. I'm a fisherman, not a golfer, guys. And I, like many town residents, would love to see the day when we can eat fish from the Hudson again without endangering our health. For this to happen, we need federal support, and this resolution in support of Clearwater is the best way now to send a message to Washington that dramatic cuts to the EPA budget are a bad deal for Orangetown and the Hudson River watershed. Please support this resolution. Even Richard Nixon, due to a public outcry, realized the need for a federally mandated program to to address environmental issues when he established EPA in 1970. The dismantling of this federal agency and extinguishing of its programs is unacceptable. I see tonight that the town board is adjourning the meeting in the memory of a great fisherman and defender of the Hudson River against corporate polluters. Robert Boyle, who passed away a couple weeks ago, just let me finish please, was a veteran of the Korean War, a naturalist, and a famous writer for Sports Illustrated, who led efforts by fishermen to sue polluters. He used the money to fund the Riverkeeper Group. The Riverkeeper boat captain, Johnny Lipscomb, is a longtime Orangetown resident. Riverkeeper, like Clearwater and Scenic Hudson, continues to support efforts to clean up the Hudson. A clean Hudson is great for tourism, for residential development, and the biodiversity. More importantly, we owe it to future generations to restore their inheritance. In honor of Boyle's life, the Blauvelt Library has been good enough to gather 12 copies of Robert Boyle's famous book about the Hudson River. These copies are available right now for anyone to borrow, and I invite members of the public as well as the town board to join me in reading this book. I have my copy here tonight, and I tell you, it's really eye-opening. It is so important to remember, for better or worse, that the past got us here, and our collective history is important in understanding and addressing today's challenges. Again, I thank the town board for hopefully supporting this resolution from Clearwater and for adjourning the meeting in the memory of Robert Boyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Is anybody else here to speak tonight? Mr. Kleiner.
Tom Kleiner, Spark Hill. I have three things I just wanted to touch on. So I'm trying to be brief with each. First, with regard to Aloof, I echo the sentiments and concerns of those who have spoken on this topic. I do want to point out, just really think certainly those who have been involved in this intimately are aware that on a positive note, Aloof still has to comply, obviously, with the DEC mandates and the mitigation plan, also with the tough performance standards that were negotiated and passed by the ZBA, I think May 11, and also the continuing enforcement by the town. It doesn't change the concerns that were raised in terms of the circumstances of the settlement, and maybe the supervisor and possibly the town attorney can enlighten us a little bit about the circumstances, because as the board knows, certainly the attorneys know, each case is different, and there may not be some issues that went into the decision to settle as opposed to try the case. I don't know the answer, but I'm interested to hear. The other thing I just wanted to mention, we are honored to have Manager Jo Green, because I've known her for many years, particularly in my last 8 as a Valley Regional rep for DOL. She is all around the region. She's a great environmental activist. We appreciate her presence here. Certainly I. And, national issues are not particularly germane to what you guys do there or in a campaign for any position on that office, but certain times, certain things thrust themselves into the public consciousness in such a way that it's incumbent upon us to take positions. So I wrote something about climate change today. You have a resolution that probably wouldn't be necessary if certain things weren't happening beyond our borders, and I too would encourage you to seriously consider that. It's not, what Orangetown does or Clarkstown isn't going to change the world in terms of what's happening with the environment on a national level, but it can't hurt, and it's necessary. It's just the circumstances. And as Mem said, just that it's not, or shouldn't be, a partisan issue. It started with Nixon, Republican, nationally, it's continued through both parties, maybe one more than another, but not anymore, I don't think. I think everybody really should be on the same page. In 30 seconds, the most important thing possibly for us as the board is John Giardella is leaving in July. That is so hugely important. I mean, it's on the agenda tonight. I'll speak about it, or certainly you guys will in the coming days. But this is a unique opportunity to fill one of the most important positions in this town. So I would only advise, and I'm sure you're going to do this, cast a wide net. We have the ability to really re-envision the position, the office, customer service for businesses and residents, and I look forward to hearing that discussion.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any other hands up for speaking during public comment? Seeing no hands, I have a motion to close for Mr. Divany, second over here from Jerry Batari. All in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. You want to start over on this side? We'll start over here. Dennis, would you like to make any comments or response? I usually defer to my colleagues, so does anybody want to? No, actually, I almost always defer to you guys for starters, and then I kind of play the cleanup role, I think. But, all right, well, you have better memory than I do. All right, fine. All right, Tom, go for it.
First of all, there was a comment by Ms. Hurley, alleging that we haven't done anything with the TRC agreement. I actually have the final marked up right here. I've been working on this for the last 4 months, going back, going over scope of work, costs. So I've been working on this myself, the only one on the board doing it, going back and discussing what's going to be included, including Joe Moran in there to give me what's going to be in the scope of work, including John Edwards to get the legal language, finding out what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, finding out costs. So we have been working on it, but I didn't want to bring a finished project to anyone until we have a finished project. I finally got the final markup from TRC today, and it's 2 sentences they want to take out. I was going to give it to John Edwards, so that's why I have original markup here. So I have been working on this diligently. As far as what happened with Aloof, Mr. Kleiner did point out some positive things. The performance standards have been approved. The plans that Aloof have proposed have been approved by the DEC. There's engineers that Aloof has hired that says that these should take care of the odors and the problems that we've had with Aloof. I'm optimistic it will happen. I can't promise that, but as I've told Ms. Sullivan, I want to take this chance because the most important thing is that it doesn't stink over there, that the smells are taken care of. So I wrote a letter in support of the ZBA approving those performance standards. And again, I remain optimistic. As far as what happened today, I know that Clean Air for Orangetown knows my position on this. I have strongly voiced my opposition to settling this matter. I thought that the residents deserve their day in court, that sometimes you just have to fight it out. And there might have been some issues with our case, but you know what? You don't put your, head between your legs and run away. You fight the good fight. We didn't. But that wasn't our opinion. That was one person who works for the town, Dennis Michaels, who decided that he would take it upon himself after written directives from me and Jerry Batari yesterday to go to trial. That was the directives. This town board, 2 weeks ago, in executive session, advised the town attorney we wanted to go to trial on this issue. So when I was going through my emails, my town emails, and I got the decision, I was pretty shocked because, in the real world, if you were working for a private company and you're an attorney and your employer told you to do something and you didn't do it, you'd be fired and you'd probably be in front of the bar for disciplinary action. So in my email to everyone involved, I said Dennis Michaels should be fired for his actions. And that's how I feel. And that's about it tonight, folks.
Others? Let me do a little sort of response to a number of the issues that were raised, just to give some updates. I'll start with the easy stuff. There are questions that people have related to town policy and issues, and they can't always be answered on the fly directly in a meeting. But you do have the right to have your questions answered always, and I would encourage For example, the detailed questions that Mr. Mandel has about the equalization rate, we can have Brian answer that question. But we're not having sort of an interrogation or a debate when it hasn't really been planned for. But please, let's make sure we get answers to questions. They're good ones. And that relates to other matters that were raised as well. And just as a point of method, we have presentations, we have comments, but we can't always provide detailed answers to every single question someone walks in with. But your right to know is absolutely respected, and I personally will work to make sure we get answers to any questions that come up. One of the questions that was raised, besides the equalization rate, which there were several questions, has to do with High Tour. I'm not on the High Tour board, and I don't have a clear sense of whether they're going to make that move to off Western Highway or not. But I do know that the organization, as you point out, is always in need of support, and it's a really wonderful service that exists for families in Orangetown and the rest of the county. The group is having an event at Tappan Zee High School this Sunday in the morning. It's a flip-flop wearing kind of quasi fun run race walk around the track, and there's a fee for entering, and it promises to be a lot of fun. And I encourage everybody to look at hightourflipflop.com if you want to support the High Tour Animal Shelter and come out and join me and my family and hopefully enough people to break the world record in the number of people wearing flip-flops and walking around a high school track, all in good fun. Support High Tour. And the land that was offered to High Tour is still there, and it's still available. And that was an offer made by the Homes for Heroes project in tandem with the town's acquisition of part of their land for a green infrastructure project. And so I have my hope that the High Tour will be able to make that move, and everybody should support them in their efforts to raise money. Let's see. Just on the question of Clearwater, I want to thank folks who spoke. I want to note that Orangetown Environmental Committee sent a supporting memo, and that I certainly supported. That's why I put it on the agenda. I appreciate the history from Alan and the perspective that others have offered, and Mana Joe's amazing work all around the region on behalf of Clearwater, raising environmental awareness. And we've accomplished so much, not we, but you and all the folks at Clearwater and through the history. And also in this town, honestly, our investment in clean water is enormous, and that includes the highway department in terms of its control over drainage and water off of roads, salt, using only as much as you need. A whole host of ways. We're pursuing LED streetlights for energy savings and therefore carbon reduction. We have invested enormously in wastewater treatment, and our effluent goes into the Hudson River. And so meeting state regulations on that and doing everything we can to improve those systems is a real focus for this town. So as we work on these sustainability issues, we do count on every other level and scale of government doing the same, and that includes the federal, which is it's sometimes a source of funding, but also a source of expertise and regulation. And that goes to questions like ALOOF as well, where there's a need for real enforcement of regulation. Unfortunately, we can't count on corporations just to do the right thing voluntarily. We saw that with GE and the need for them to be forced to clean up the Hudson River with the PCBs. And we see that with ALOOF's foot dragging and finger pointing and general failure to take responsibility for the odor that they're creating. And that's been just sort of amazing to see, really, going over there and having the owner sit down and say, odor, what odor? Even as we're in a conversation with their engineers about how to fix the odor. So the level of kind of obliviousness to community concern is pretty shocking. Having said that, to me, well, first of all, the case shouldn't have been settled. I mean, the town board expressed what it wanted to see happen. And I agree with Tom Divany that it shouldn't have been settled. That's what we had intended. I know that Dennis, like all of our town attorneys, is always trying to do the right thing for the town. And I'm not going to stand here and indict him without fully understanding, the reasoning behind his position. And I know that there's probably a good case to be made either way. More importantly, it's the lawsuit is just part of an effort which really centers on making sure that the agreement that Aloof has with the DEC to have their operating permit is robustly requiring the maximum possible investment in odor control, emission control, and upgrades of their ventilation systems. And that is where the rubber meets the road. We expect next week to have the draft permit from the DEC as a public comment document, and the town will continue to use all the resources that we can muster to make sure that plan, which is well underway to re-engineer the odor control, takes place in a way that is up to the task of solving the odor problem. And that's where the real work is. I think the lawsuit was a really important thing because it helped to kind of push and corner Aloof. And it's unfortunate, perhaps, that it was settled for $12,500. But believe me, you know, the hundreds of thousands, or who knows, more million that are being invested in re-engineering that facility are the real deal when it comes to actually solving the odor problem. You know, not the resolution of some claims that were disappointed in that resolution. But fortunately, it's not the whole story. And I commend our town staff on the zoning board and the building department, the town attorney's office, and throughout the town, really, and especially the community members who have raised this issue and really been the force to get the DEC to focus on it in a way I don't think they focus on other towns. I mean, these guys are really here a lot, and they're working for us in a way that was only possible because of the community call for that kind of action. So I wanted to say that. And then let me just see, we had a couple other good comments. I'm not going to, let me see, equalization rate. I think that pretty much covers what folks came out and specifically asked us about tonight. And I thank others for making comments. Is anybody else going to respond? Jerry, would you like to say a word or two?
Yeah, I'd like to start off agreeing with you with the Clearwater. I think that was a very nice presentation. I agree with it. The Hudson River is a resource to us in the area, and it's a wonderful place to recreate and other things. I do agree, Mr. Mandel. I think Brian should have stayed. You asked questions that, quite honestly, we had conversations and I couldn't answer those questions technically. He should be, and we should get him back to it. Not an interaction back and forth, but allow people to ask him the questions that you want to know. I do agree with that, and he is a department head, and he should stay here. As far as Aloof, I did check my email this morning. I did not check it later on until I got a call from Tom. I am greatly disappointed. My understanding is we were at the last Friday was that this was going to be going to trial. We had a conversation with someone there at the function, and they backed it as well, other community members. I have not talked to Dennis Michael. I have not talked to anybody else about it. Like I said, I got a call from Tom advising me this evening. So without really finding out exactly where it came from, what the decision was, why the decision was, I think that I would have to put anything off until that time. But I am not happy with the decision, and I'd like to know some of the answers that you'd like to know. So hopefully we'll get those and get them to you.
Paul?
Okay. Michael, I always appreciate your questions because you always come up with some really good questions. I think that if you knew he was coming tonight, it would have been a good idea to email them to us so we could get them to him so we can get some answers for you. But if you get the questions, like Andy said, either to the town supervisor's office and copy us on it, we'll make sure that the answers are here, and we'll have him answer them in person. Maybe we can have an open screaming match or public debate, because personalities sometimes get in the way of getting to the answers. but it would be a good thing to get all of your questions answered, and they're really good questions. So I appreciate you bringing them forward. Thank you. Aloof, we all sat inside the room with the town attorney's office and told them we did not want to settle. We told them we didn't want to settle because sometimes even when you lose a case, you win. And it was more about just winning $12,000 or $12,500. It was more about making them say they were responsible for what the odors were. They know they're responsible, right? We know they know they're responsible. The DC knows that they're responsible, and they're going after them to make changes to make it better. I hear all the time that this has been going on for years. I've been on the board for 6 years. I've only heard about it for 1 year, and that was when Ms. Sullivan brought it to our attention. In that 1 year's time, I think there's been a lot of good movement, and it was mostly due to Ms. Sullivan coming out and raising this issue as a local Blauvelt resident and keeping our, I'm sorry. Sorry, Mrs. Sullivan. But to keeping our feet to the fire, to making sure that we are following up on the issue. And it has not gone away. Now, I live in the community. I live in the community with my kids and my grandkids. I work in the community. I pass Mrs. Sullivan's house 15 times a day, going back and forth up and down Erie Street or Arthur Street or in and out of those blocks, from my office to the post office, to the library, to anywhere you can name. I'm in this town all day long. So I hear you, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I think the town board has really been working diligently. I'm not going to talk about what Mr. Michael Slaughter did, because I only got this email when Tom brought it to my attention at 5:30. Did you read your town email? Did you see they settled? Well, it would be unfair for me to judge him and say this or that, when I didn't even get a chance to speak to him and see the circumstances, so I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Let me find out what his reasons were, and then I can make an educated decision instead of just jumping at a decision. So I can tell you one thing for sure. We, as a town board, collectively said we'd rather not settle. We do not want to settle. I don't care if we lose in court. I'd rather lose than settle. And it got settled, so it is what it is, but we'll try to get to the bottom of that. Anything else? Clearwater, I'm also a fisherman. And I appreciate the fact that the Hudson River has been getting cleaner over years. It's not where I would eat the fish out of it yet either. I do fish there, but I let them go. So, but I appreciate all the hard work that's been going into making all of our waterways cleaner. So, that's it for me. You're up, Dennis.
Thank you, Paul. Dennis?
As far as Brian Kenny coming in tonight, I know I put an email, I wanted Brian Kenny in here because we had a speaker several weeks ago talking about how much the taxes are going up, and then people go crazy because they listen to somebody with partial information, all right? And it was important that we get accurate information. I have to thank Brian Kenny. What he did do is he did send us copies of his correspondence back and forth with the state, explained it to the best of his ability, and maybe the best of our ability to understand it. It's still murky. I agree with you, Michael, about that, and that more needs to be explained. I also agree that send the questions in. Whether the department head stays here or not, that's up to the supervisor. You know, he's their boss. As far as aloof, I saw the settlement today. I had Mr. Divany yelling at me on the phone. And it was a thing where I was trying to read the settlement at the same time. I understood why he was upset, because it basically said, okay, there is no blame. We're not accepting any blame for anything. It's really a no-fault decision. We're just paying the $12,500 in order to pay for the expenses of the town. That's not really a satisfactory conclusion. I get all that. But as far as Ms. Sullivan talking about the fact that only two people were in the case, the court case, again, You are 100%. We've gotten hundreds of emails, all sorts of different names. You know, some are far more familiar than others because some, I don't know, they're out there at 5 o'clock in the morning, they're out there at 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, it's a thing where it's very annoying. Me personally, I go to therapy right down in, not for my head, for my knee, down in Procore, right there by Bailey's. A year ago, I bagged up my head and I lost my sense of smell. So I've driven through there. I no feeling whatsoever, you know, for, you know, the smell there. I've been on the board for 18 years, and this case does not go back. It might have been back in the 90s, but it was not 2000 up to, you know, it started coming here again. In terms of the DEC, I don't know if I have confidence in the DEC to enforce what they've come up with. They're talking about closing the doors, which to me is a rather obvious thing. I wouldn't want to work in there, but the doors have to be shut. The air is supposed to be refiltered within the facility, because what's happening now is it's just going outside and it's going out into the community, which is not fair to the community at all. The DEC, what's his name, George Swikert? All right, he seems to be on top of this, and it's going to come down to, and it's coming up shortly, what they have to do is, does the DEC enforce what they set out to do? And then there are more serious fines, you know, dealing with the DEC. In terms of Dennis Michaels has been a long-time attorney here. He's done a very good job here, you know, through the years. In terms of firing him, I can understand the consternation about not communicating properly and how we ended up where we are now. But I'm not, you know, for firing him. You know, so it's something I think we need to have the discussions. We didn't know why he did what he did, but, you know, where do we go from here, I think is the big question. As far as Clearwater, I have swam in the Hudson River various times, once trying to swim across Hudson River. I've also gone off boats up in Ossining, up in Haverstraw, you know, swimming in the Hudson River. There are very clean places in the Hudson River. The one I was swimming out of Piermont, and getting out to the Hudson was not exactly a great experience. But it's a thing where what has been done over the last 40 years is very, very important. What I will vote for this tonight. What I don't necessarily support is, I read the entire resolution, you know, and I know there are some, every time there's something that's a cut, you can't have a cut to this program or this program or that program. And one of the great questions in the federal government is what's really a cut and what isn't a cut. Is if you don't increase by 7%, you only increase by 4%, that's a 3% cut. It's not necessarily a 3% cut. So I think that really needs to be looked at. We got a $20 trillion deficit in this country. And it's hard to believe. Something has to be cut. You know, thank God Orangetown doesn't run like the federal government runs. You know, it's a thing where things really have to be looked at, but I will support this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, all the town board members, for your responses. And if that's all we've got for now, I'd love to move on with our agenda. And we have a couple of items for a vote. And we also are going to need to do an executive session. So let's just get a move on here. And thanks to those who came out tonight. Item number 1 is the amendment of the access agreement for Russo Development to take a look at some town land on Old Orangeburg Road, discussed last week.
Excuse me, Andy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know how it works with the public portion, and then the town board respond, and occasionally you ask me to respond, and Dennis asked me if I wanted to say anything.
Okay.
And you know, it didn't seem, but there are people who are leaving. You know, and let me just say a couple of things. Number one, I'm disappointed that this matter is being addressed in the manner that it is. Why? Because for 14 years I've sat up here, and personnel matters, some involving the commission of a crime, have been done in confidence, in executive session first, and then the ultimate disposition by the use of an employee number. For some reason, Mr. Michaels, who's been here for 21 years, longer than anybody, including myself by far, maybe not Charlotte, suddenly there's a difference. We're not concerned. He's not a police officer. We're not concerned. He's not a member of the CSEA. We're not concerned. It's not fair, okay? Now, I spoke to Dennis today. I'm not going to tell you I'm happy with him, but I support him, and I support his decision ultimately because it was for the right reasons. And what was so difficult sitting here tonight, I'm not surprised. It's what was said and what was expected. The Justice Court is a quasi, in the context of town violations, is not the DEC. Tom, you know that. It's not a regulatory body that runs by its own rules, that has a kangaroo court with astronomical fines. It's a quasi-criminal proceeding that runs in accordance with the dictates of the criminal procedure law. The burden of proof is far beyond anything you're going to see at the DEC or any other regulatory body. My question is, what do the people of Orangetown, what do you as a board want as a result of this? I had thought the end result that you would want would be the elimination of the odor that causes such consternation. And what do I hear? I hear we wanted them to step up and accept blame. Guess what? At a trial, nobody accepts blame. That's called a plea of guilty. They weren't pleading guilty. So if you're waiting for Aloof and the representatives of Aloof to step up and say, we acknowledge this, we acknowledge that, please, fine us heavily, do this. It's not happening. I heard that, why were there only 2 people? Okay? Has anybody forgotten that when Aloof was first cited, they went to the ZBA, they filed an application, and they got an automatic stay of enforcement. You're not filing violations while they're before the ZBA. Now, they got their performance standard review approval last month, okay? And you know what? There was some pretty darn good provisions put into that approval, which were done voluntarily by Aloof, that ensure monitoring that we could not as a town just willy-nilly do going forward at their expense if necessary. There were some hard provisions negotiated and agreed to that I would think have value in the overall context of what we're trying to accomplish. But it seems like all we're interested in is the difference between $12,500 and possibly $20,000. Yeah, no, Tom, there's,
Thank you. Thanks for the lecture,
Sorry.
John.
Okay.
Thank you, Dad.
I'm telling
Thank
you,
you.
I'm telling you.
Now I can go to bed tonight. Thank you.
You know what? Everybody's had their comment.
Way to go, Aloof.
Okay.
Give me a goddamn break.
So, you know what?
It was very good, Tom, to send out on a personnel matter 72 emails. Very well done. Exactly as you have done on every other personnel matter that's come before this board. Oh, no. I forget. That has never happened
Well,
before.
John,
Very good.
John, everyone one knew who the attorney was at the court today.
Why do you circulate something about firing? So everybody
Because
knew.
that's how I
Ma-
feel. That's how I feel.
Good.
And I told you that. I told you that. I'm sorry, John. John,
That's,
I
you
told...
guys, that's enough. That's really
No,
enough.
you know what? We let him go. Here's the deal. That's my personal opinion. I was elected to this board by the people in this town. The people in the town wanted action. So did I. You have your opinion. I have mine. You work for us, though, John, and so does Dennis Michaels. And he told us to go screw ourselves. So he's going to have to deal with the ramifications, John, and that's how it works in the real world.
All right, that's probably enough on that topic. It's real, it's authentic disagreement, and we're going to move on to other business the town has. Thank you both for your shared concern for the town, and there's a lot that needs to be discussed here. Number one, on the access agreement, we workshopped that last week. Excuse me, guys. Let's bring it back to the agenda. All right, we could certainly have a conversation offline about these matters. I'll make a motion for this access agreement amendment. Do I have a second over here from Paul Valentine? All in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Number two is the Clearwater resolution, ably presented. I'll make a motion for this. Do I have a second from over here from Batari? All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. Number three is this housekeeping from the Justice Court. I'll make a motion for this. Have a second from Tom Divany. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Number four is the receive and file of 4 documents by the town clerk. Motion from Dennis Troy, second from Jerry Batari. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Number 6 is a tax cert settlement involving the Rockland Country Club and the town and the school district. Move from Divany, second from myself. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Number 6 is the transportation contract for summer camp, looks like, from the Parks Department with Chestnut Ridge Transportation. I have a motion from Valentine, second from Divany. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Number 7 is use of the showmobile for Music Festival in Nyack on June 27th. I'll make a motion for this. Invite everybody to come down and enjoy the music. Have a second over here from Jerry Batari. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Number 8 is the acceptance with regret of the retirement of John Giardello as director of our Office of Building, Planning, Zoning, and Enforcement, effective July 22nd. The town personnel director, Donna Morrison, and the town board are putting together a job description and an ad, and we hope to catch some really wonderful applicants for this competitive position. So let's see, Jerry Batari, got a motion for this. A second from Dennis Troy. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Number 9, this relates to the public hearing for the amendments in the historic area law and scheduling that public hearing for it's rescinding the public hearing that was scheduled, and does it set a new date, I guess is the question. Set a public hearing. All right. It doesn't set a new date. So it rescinds the one that was supposed to happen tonight, and make a motion for that. A second over here. But Valentine, all in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Number 10. This is the town recently created a moratorium on communications or radio towers. It was broadly defined, and there's an applicant in process for a pole and in process at the planning board. And the moratorium provides for the town board to be able to enable an application to continue at the planning board. And this would be a motion to allow the planning board to continue to review the application in question here, which is the SCAE site plan antenna on Blaisdell Road. I'll make a motion for this. Do I hear a second? From Troy. Discussion?
Circulation to the Rockland County Department of Planning Board. So this process, it was put in there because moratoriums, they are applied. So
We had a,
careful what you do. Might be doing it again next week.
So do we have to wait to see if he followed that process, or we're sure he did?
Well, I haven't seen it. Nothing was filed. Yes, Don?
Donald, could I ask you to speak to this matter briefly?
And if you can get the Department of Planning to respond, you know, sooner than that, you know, there's no requirement in the law that 30 days pass. It's simply that it has to be circulated to the county.
I'll give it up in the right way. I think you have to pass the resolution giving permission to do that. Under your code, I think.
So this will be approving the application for the hardship exception, but maybe we should put in here and circulating the application to the Rockland County Planning Department. Okay. So I'm just going to add to the end of this, after that parenthesis, a comma, and circulating application to Rockland County Planning Department for comment. Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
It's supposed to be a hearing. Do you want to set the date for a public hearing? You can make it less than 30 if Donald thinks he can get the county to respond, or if somebody on the board thinks that the county will respond in less time.
Let's see, we have meetings on the 13th, on the 20th, not on the 27th. All right?
We have meetings July 11th.
So if you want to shoot for the 20th, we'll shoot for the 20th. So we'll set a public hearing for, I guess, 8:05, 8:10, something like that. It's a regular town board meeting, so we'll have public comment and then do the hearing. And set public hearing for 6:20 at, I'm going to say 8:10 p.m., all right, Charlie? Okay, thanks for that clarification. Right. Or shortly thereafter, but not before. I'll make a motion for this. Do I hear? Oh, we already did that, actually. We had a motion and a second, I'm pretty sure. Did you record those? So make sure Charlie's got.
You made the motion.
Well, actually, the one for setting the, we did the hardship one. Supervisor Stewart.
Okay.
Right,
Second,
and now-
really, the amended, you seconded the amended version, adding in the,
So he seconded the amending version, so,
going to the planning board, county planning board, and then
Date
for 6:20.
all right.
Now, so the amendment is by whom?
It's by me, and it's seconded, and we're good to go. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Setting the date.
I thought that was in our amended version of it. We amended it to say, in circulation of the application to the planning department for comment and setting a public hearing for June 20th at 8:05. Okay, number 11 is this is the first of several we're working feverishly on some grants to get money for town infrastructure. Items 11 and 12 pertain to an application to the Environmental Facilities Corporation for money to do something that the wastewater treatment plant has to do. Joe, could you just come up for 1 minute and explain to the board exactly what dechlorination is, so that we have a sense of what this project, why we need to do it, how much it's going to cost. In the terms of this grant, like past ones we've gotten from environmental facilities, are that they grant you 25% of the cost of the project, which would be a nice chunk of change if we can get the grant.
To the river, and what's happened is DEC has lowered the limit of residual chlorine that's allowable within that process from 0.5 milligrams per liter to 1 milligram per liter. So we have to upgrade our dosing system.
And that runs roughly $800,000 or something like that.
Retrofit existing equipment. It's a pretty stringent requirement. You can imagine 0.5 milligrams per liter represents about a liter.
Right. So then it's going down. Faye, any questions from the town board members about this project? So that's roughly $775,000 in total, and we're shooting to get almost $200,000 as a grant. We appreciate the work of the finance office and Demi. Motion from Divany, second from myself. All in favor, say aye. Thank you, Joe. Number 12, motion from Divany, second from myself. All in favor, say aye. All right, and that's give Sylvia Welch the go-ahead. There's a couple of other grants which are in process, and I think I emailed the town board about them. It actually looks like late this afternoon I got the message. It looks like part of our telemetry project can be grant funded, and so we'll be working on that. And then there's a deadline in July for the consolidated funding applications, and that's where the highway projects for the first flush system and the culvert on Route 303 come in. So as soon as Sylvia finishes up with the June applications, we'll turn around and work on those for July. Number 13 is the voucher, and we have our finance director here to lead us through that.
Total of $2.1 million. First warrant had 63 vouchers for $142,000 was for utilities. Second warrant had 313 vouchers for $1.998 million. Following that is interest, 1 and 2, Clyde Golf, contract for Blue Mountain Broadacres. Number 5, Calamar, $25,000 for emergency sewer repairs. Number 7, CSAEA Employee Benefit Fund, $28,000 for dental benefits. Number 10, NTEC, $234,000 for sewer relining. Number 20, JDB Process Equipment, $29,000 for sewer plant repairs. Number 21, Jory Excavating, $86,000 for sidewalks. Number 23, Mitsubishi Construction Corp., $60,000 for their sewer plant closeout. Number 24, Department of Civil Service, $696,000 for CSA Healthcare. Number 25, Pearl River Chamber of Commerce, $20,000 for holiday light expenses. And number 29, State Comptroller, $34,000 for justice funds.
Do a motion from Divany, second over here from Jerry Bottari. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you so much, Jeff, on that. Now, we do have, are there any other new business items anybody wants to bring up? Because we have planned an executive session to talk about the CSEA contract for one thing, and also the terms of our contract of sale for the property for J.P. Morgan. Also wanted to address with the town board. Those are the main items for executive session. I'll make a motion for that. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Valentine, all in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. So we will do adjournments because we won't be conducting more town business when we're finished with executive session. So there's no need for people to to wait for us. We have 4 individuals who we're memorializing with this adjournment. Angelina Benicasa of Spark Hill, mother-in-law of Michael Yanazone, and police officer, grandmother of police officer Michael Yanazone Jr., 2 greatly valued town employees, the highway department, police department, in a wonderful family in Spark Hill, lost their mother-in-law, grandmother. So we're memorializing Mrs. Benicasa, Ray Hartman, Attorney Donald Brenner's sister, Robert Boyle, the recently passed author of Hudson River, A Natural and Unnatural History, a dozen copies of which Alan has arranged to be at the Blauvelt Library. It's quite an extraordinary book, an extraordinary man, a journalist and a fisherman, and a great defender of the river. And lastly, Joyce Edwards, and I don't know any of the biographical information about Mrs. Edwards, a resident of Pearl River.
Well, she was originally from Pearl River. She lived in Blauvelt around the corner in Cobble, from my house.
Yep.
And she has a young daughter, 12-year-old daughter. She was married to John Edwards, who was the Knights of Columbus.
Nice Columbus. No, Joyce graduated the same year as I did. She went to Albertus.
She went to Albertus. I know she lived on Cobble, and Nancy taught her in religion.
But in the memories of these
Joyce
town
Higgins
residents,
Edwards.
Right.
in the memory of these 4 individuals, I'll make a motion to close this meeting tonight. Thank everybody for coming out.
Jim Finnegan.
All right, adding Mr. Finnegan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Divany, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Jim Finnegan. Jim Finnegan. All righty. I hear you. I respect that. I respect that.